Ooh, I faded the wrong way. Faded lower and not higher. I'll bring it back up just because, you know what? Jam into it a little bit for a second.
Getting into it this week.
All right, shut up. Music. It's enough. We've had about enough out of you.
It's a really talented artist that we got to do that song for us.
Yep.
Yeah. Sitar player.
I just can't pronounce his name.
Yeah. It's like Swami Ramakavanda.
There's definitely a Swami in there and a Rama in there for sure somewhere, but I'm not sure in what order.
It's a computer, though.
It is a computer.
It's an AI. It's an Indian AI program.
It is an Indian computer, yeah. Good morning and welcome back to another episode of the Two Tongues Podcast. Podcast where it's very early, you guys. Daylight savings time.
It's not that early.
It is daylight savings time today. And Kyle, he calls me. I'm sound asleep. Hold on, I'm gonna get a drink of coffee, you guys.
Gotta get that slurp in the microphone, man. Come on.
He calls me.
You're missing the chances to trigger people.
Calls me, and I was asleep, and he's like, "Hey, man, you gotta let me in your house. It's cold out here because he's locked out." And I look at my clock, and it's like, we should have started the podcast 15 minutes ago because I keep forgetting that we sprung forward. You know,
I had no idea. I realized after I woke up, but I actually thought that we gained an hour. You know.
It's hilarious to me.
Just because I felt so rested, I wasn't even thinking, spring forward, you lose an hour. I just woke up feeling so good, rested, ready to go, ready to come record this podcast. You're asleep.
You were hanging out at my house last night a little while, and so I ended up staying up a little bit later than I would have, just because. Plus, the other household member was out and about, and I kind of wanted to make sure that she got back safely. So I was up a little bit later than last night, and then I lost an hour's sleep by magic, some kind of
trickery.
Some kind of trickery from the government. It's got to be the government's fault.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan
of the government or daylight savings.
I'm not a huge fan of the government. That goes without saying, but of daylight savings too. Yeah, I think it's pretty stupid.
If the government is responsible for daylight savings, the government cannot be good.
True. That's the worst thing they do. It's like shift things by an hour.
Yeah, it was like prison camps for the Japanese of the Second World War and daylight savings. Those were the two worst things.
Yeah. And it's like that's a far back second.
Can you think of a worse thing that the United States is guilty of apart from putting Japanese citizens in prison camps during the Second World War?
Like officially on the books?
No, like not necessarily. Like, we can get wild.
I mean, we can get wild, huh? Well, I mean, there's some reasonable speculation that the government was in some way enabling Jeffrey Epstein and his child sex trafficking.
That'd be pretty bad.
So,
what just popped in my head was the one about the government injecting black people with syphilis.
Yeah.
And then just waiting to see how it was going to wreck them.
Pretty dark.
That is terrible.
Pretty fucked up.
Is that worse than the prison camps though for the Second World War? I don't know. It might be.
Yeah, it's up there. It's hard to quantify these things, It
is, yeah.
Like what is worse? How do you?
Oh, I know what might be worse. Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Pretty bad. Pretty bad, especially when you look into, less widely accepted narratives of what was really going on during World War II. When you start looking into that kind of stuff, it's like, whoa, like the stuff they don't tell you. We had won already. We didn't need to do it.
It's funny because I was thinking that myself. Like, I don't know how much. Sorry, I don't know how much like time and ammunition and lives that the United States thought they were going to save by dropping bombs. Like, if the alternative meant like a ground invasion, maybe we made the right decision. But if if the war was basically won at that point and the Japanese were going to surrender anyway, it's super fucked up.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the truth is. I don't know what the truth is, man.
And I mean, even without the bombs, they were firebombing cities just with regular bombs before that. They destroyed a lot of Japan. I mean, I guess they asked for it. They did fuck with us for it. That's like one of the ones, it's like there's although, I mean, Pearl Harbor was a weird thing too. Like there's weird shit with Pearl. Imagine that, just like all of these things throughout American history where they like change the course of our, the direction of our country. All of them have these weird, like, I don't know, that's weird, like Pearl Harbor. I guess they moved a bunch of ships, like ships that they didn't want to lose. They like moved them out a few days before.
Oh, really?
There's like no way that they didn't know that it was coming.
I never heard that one, but excuse me. But I did hear that they caught a U-boat. I don't know if U-boat's the right word. That means it was German submarine. They caught a Japanese submarine in some kind of like net.
It's a J-boat.
It's a J-boat. I guess they had some kind of nets that they would use. I don't know, man. This is just what I heard. And so they caught
they got a submarine with a net.
Yeah. That's a fishing net. Just no, I think it was like a defensive perimeter net designed specifically to keep U-boats or to detect them or something. And so they detected one that was in the waters of American waters, basically. And it was like an hour or something before the attack. So we knew technically something was amiss and perhaps could have sounded the alarm an hour before the attack. And it was like a surprise, right? When it actually happened, everyone was surprised.
Yeah.
But we had evidence an hour beforehand or whatever. Snopes that, guys, but you better Snopes that. But I did hear that.
Don't be a fact checker. Just accept it.
That's more fun.
For sure. Yeah.
The more you accept our stories, the crazier the stories you're going to get.
For sure. I was going to say something. I forget what it was. It slipped my mind.
We talked about Epstein, and then we were talking about Pearl Harbor.
What other fucked up things?
Did you see that list? I don't know, man. I say that like it's definitive. I saw a list on Twitter of all the names of people that were associated with having visited Epstein's Island.
I don't know if I've seen the most recent list. I think I heard that some stuff got released, but
yeah, it was a whole bunch of
celebrities,
basically. Yeah. Well, rich people too, but like Madonna was on the list, and
Does that surprise you? Like knowing Madonna, does that surprise you that Madonna was maybe into some weird shit?
That's a good question. I mean, it kind of does surprise me because you can see the look on my eyes right now. I'm like a little bit surprised.
Yeah, I can tell, and it's surprising to me.
Yeah. Just thinking about
she just seems like a fucking creep to me.
Yeah, it's hard for me to imagine women as predators, sexual predators.
Really?
Yeah, it's a little bit hard for me to imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I know like statistically, it's more likely to be guys, but no, it for sure happens.
It makes you wonder what possesses.
Look at all these fucking teachers banging teenage students.
Isn't that interesting? Because when you think about like a guy predator, he's always like fat and old, and he's not the kind of guy that a woman is going to want to be with, even if she is, consenting. But when it's the woman that's the sexual predator, why is she always a hot teacher? She's always a hot teacher.
I think it says something about the psychology of a lot of hot people. You know what I mean? They're so.
Go on.
They're they're good looking, so they get attention a lot, and they just fucking need it from everybody, man. Even the teenage boys in their class.
See, that's interesting. I kind of think that, like, if you discover,
I don't think all hot people are like that, by the way, just to clarify.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
If you discover that you have a skill or some valuable characteristic,
lean into it.
Yeah, you learn to. It becomes like a tool, and so. It's like beautiful women don't pay for drinks at the bar. Why? Because they don't fucking have to.
Yeah.
And so, but then you start to rely on that.
Yeah.
And then you like get old and you're not hot anymore. And that's like a very strange thing. But I guess what I want to say though is I think that beautiful women and I guess beautiful men too, probably they learn.
Beautiful man.
They learn how to use it, how to manipulate people. They use it as a tool. And I don't know where I was going. I lost my thread there.
Happens.
Oh, it seems like a choice. Like you're gonna choose to manipulate people. It's not like it just becomes second nature, but maybe it does for people that are like that. Maybe it does become second nature.
Yeah.
Because I'm
Like taking advantage of people.
yeah.
Yeah.
Specifically, I don't know, man. Do you think that like good-looking people, things generally, most?
I mean, on some level, I think got to be some level on which things are hard, but yeah,
There's got to be some really interesting ways in which being beautiful and being rich sucks
well,
that we
it's
just
just
don't, we
like
just don't understand.
it's just the element of humanity, being a human. Things, you suffer in various ways. I'm sure that attractive people suffer too.
Do you remember what's that actress's name? Beautiful lady. She was in Seventh Heaven. What was her name?
I don't.
Jessica Biel.
Oh,
You remember Jessica Biel?
I do remember
Jessica Biel. Holy crap, Jessica Biel.
Yeah.
I remember her say one time, don't snub me on this, but I'm pretty sure she said this shit, that she was typecast out of lots of roles because she was too beautiful.
Too good looking.
Too beautiful. And I'm like, yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I can see that. You might be too beautiful, Jessica Biel.
I mean, I've had that problem before.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just like you walk into a room and all the heads whip around. And
yeah.
It's like, I know, it's hard. It's a real problem.
Yeah, being beautiful is a real problem.
This was I could have gotten away with that before we went over to YouTube when it was just the audio. People would have no idea. But alas, the mystery is gone.
Yeah. Speaking of mystery, I don't want to necessarily derail this wonderful conversation we're having, but I was starting to tell you last night whilst you were hanging out. Me thinks you were hanging out, and that's an interesting one. Me thinks. All one word, no spaces in between. It's a legit spell check's not going to correct you on that. It's a real thing. Me thinks.
Yep. Siri's not going to fuck with you.
No. What was I saying?
Me thinks.
No, before that.
You were saying last night.
Last night we were talking about so all right, so over the last few conversations, maybe going back a couple of months now, we've been talking a little bit about Kyle's interest in getting back into church, and not just any church, but Eastern Orthodox Christian church, which is not something that we grew up in. It's something that just had an appeal to you. It is foreign. Is that part of the appeal, do you think? The exoticness of it?
Don't
lie to me, Kyle.
I don't really think so, because there are elements of it that are foreign that I've kind of experienced with Catholicism a little bit, just like the more I don't mean this to, I feel like this is going to sound insulting in some way, and I don't mean it to, but I want to say the pageantry, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And just the more ritualistic, I think that all of that is like dialed up in Orthodoxy, but I kind of had some experience with it with the limited Catholic.
Do you think that a Catholic would be insulted to hear you describe it as pageantry?
I think that you could say that it's pageantry and be a dick. Like you could be all the pageantry, you know, and that's just not how I mean it. But it's just like I couldn't find a better word.
Yeah, I understand. If you say that like Rachel Maddow, you can tell like you're taking a jab.
Rachel Maddow, that dude is crazy.
Yeah, that dude is crazy. Excuse me, guys. Fuck.
So you were talking about Orthodoxy.
Yeah, I was just saying that. I think what I told you last night was that you take it seriously, so I thought I should take it seriously. So I was exploring the old YouTubes.
Yep.
I was watching a whole bunch of videos.
Chris is blooming in his YouTube watching. Where you started streaming on YouTube, and now you're into it.
If I'm going to be on YouTube, I might as well watch one or two videos off the damn thing. Dude. So anyway, I kind of went all over the place as you do in a YouTube rabbit hole. I watched the videos about some Gnostic groups like the Manichaeans and the Mandeans, and I started getting into Christian mysticism, and specifically I looked up Theosis and watched some videos about what Theosis is. And for those people who don't know, and I've learned this recently, Theosis is theological concept that's unique to Orthodox Christianity. And it basically says, and I'm probably going to get this wrong, and Kyle's probably going to disagree with the meaning, but it seems to mean something like becoming God, right? We can argue about what that means.
Something like that.
We can argue about what that means, but yes, something like that. And they frame it like it is the goal of a spiritual practice. To be a Christian means you're aiming at theosis. And that's really fucking interesting to me, man.
Mm-hmm. It is different and I think more compelling than any other form of Christianity, any other like end goal. You know what I'm saying? Otherwise, I mean, when it's Protestant, at least the way I thought about it back then, I assume that there are some Protestants who have a more complex, understanding of what comes after life and what the point of everything is. But back when I was a kid, it was just kind of heaven, which is,
Yep.
I don't know, just not the most compelling.
That's true.
Yeah,
I have to say, theosis is far more compelling than the story that we grew up hearing, which is basically realize you're a sinner, get saved, spend the rest of your life trying not to fuck up again, and then go to heaven.
Yeah.
And the Orthodox are like, get baptized, become God.
So, we were talking about how you liked that guy, E. Michael Jones, saying that Paul went to Ephesus and tried to talk to them and like just missed the mark.
Yeah, I like that.
And then John realized that and then recontextualize it in a way that they were like, oh, I understand what you're talking about.
Yes.
With the logos.
Logos, Kyle.
Why did I bring that up? The heaven, the story of like going to heaven. I mean, he says the kingdom of heaven, like, that's in the book. So they're going to have to try to conceptualize it in some way. But I mean, I think that when they say the kingdom of heaven, they're not talking about like that idea that I had of heaven when I was, 10.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. They're talking about theosis,
It's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that, connecting that to theosis, the kingdom of God, but that's interesting.
And like my point with the logos thing is like, now I'm like capable of understanding it that way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm capable of conceptualizing, to some degree anyways, theosis. I'm not trying to pretend like I understand it at all. I don't.
Yeah.
I have a lot more studying and, doing, you have to do, it's, you don't just like say, hey, I'm in, know, and then you're in. That's not how it works, to my understanding.
So I'm going to jump all over the place, but that's another point where Orthodoxy and Jordan Peterson have a crossover, which I think is really interesting, where the Orthodox faith talks about human beings participating in the energies of God. Yeah. And that means it requires that you act them out in the world. So it's like you have this lure, you have this instinct, but it's not real unless you embody it. You act it out in the world. And so if God is love, you have to actually love people.
Mm-hmm.
That's how love exists, through your actions. It's beautiful. But Jordan Peterson says exactly the same thing. He says that your ideals can be seen in your behavior, that you act out your ideals. And if you want to know what somebody thinks, don't bother listening to them. Watch them, see how they act, because they're going to act out what they actually believe. They might tell you something very different, but their behavior is going to show you what they actually believe. And so there's this connection there between Jordan Peterson talking about embodying and the Orthodox Church talking about embodying energies. It's very similar, man.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say, to put some context, if this makes any sense to anybody, the difference between most Catholic church, most Christian churches talking about heaven as the goal of spirituality, and the Orthodox talking about theosis, it's kind of like the way Buddhists have nirvana. Nirvana is a state of being that you can achieve through the right types of discipline and spiritual practice. It's something like that the Orthodox are saying theosis is. It's a state of being that you can achieve through the right state of mind.
So, the idea that like there's like the perennial philosophy that it's just like these ideas keep occurring over and over. Something that I've heard people say that I think back in the day, a few years ago, I probably would have been offended at this idea. It's like, you're being judgmental, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, it's hard to describe. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, it'll come back to you.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're good, man.
So nirvana and theosis. So something like that. Oh, it's coming back to you? Is it coming back to you?
Yeah. No, it's not. It's starting to, but I can't. Okay. I can't grasp it. It's whatever it is. It's gone.
Well, so I was just trying to put context around what, trying to make sense of what theosis means, and it is a far more compelling narrative, and I think and the perennial philosophy that you were talking about links back to that. Not just this idea of like a nirvana theosis type thing, if I can respectfully categorize those things together, but it also has to do with that mystical oneness. That shit is all over orthodoxy.
Yeah.
And that's really surprising to me and really interesting to me. The idea of God being one and that being very important, and that idea showing up in the early church fathers. I was surprised about that. And there's a quote from Psalms, I think. Psalms? I think it's Psalms, where, no, this is, anyway, I'll just tell you the quote from the Bible. It says, maybe it was in Acts. It says,
I don't know, man.
It says, God, hold on, I'll, rather than misquote this, let me just pull it up.
Got it in Word.
Yeah, this is the new episode I've got coming up right here, Theosis. So I got the quotes in here. Here it is. Nope, that's not it. Yeah, here it goes. It says, they should seek the Lord, though he be not far from every one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. In God, we live and move and have our being. I thought that was pretty amazing. But some of these early church fathers, they're up at the top right here.
Yeah.
So you've got fathers. Yeah, St. Anthony of Egypt. He who knows himself knows God.
Yep.
And Athanasius, God became human so that we might become God.
And I like that name, Athanasius.
Athanasius is cool.
It's a good one, man.
Clement of Alexandria, when you see your brother or sister, you see God.
Yeah.
So this whole thing here is going to be about an exploration of theosis in basically relating what we mean when we say Jesus was God to what we mean when we say we can become God through theosis.
Yeah.
So I'm I'm very interested in this.
So what I was trying to say earlier,
yes.
I just have like a hard time putting it into context. It's just that like orthodoxy has this idea that you can find those truths, the truth that runs through the perennial philosophy, they were getting at something, but they didn't quite develop it all the way, or, they're missing the mark somehow.
Yeah.
And that is, I just think that as far as religions and worldviews, Orthodox Christianity, it's like the most complete one that I've seen. Especially as far as Christianity goes, like it's got like all these elements that I needed it to have that it never had for me before.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean, but
so yeah, it's like I just couldn't get that thought out. I don't know. I was really struggling.
No, it's okay. Can you think of particular examples of where like Protestant Christianity fell short for you, where you were like, it's missing something, you didn't realize it until you saw it somewhere else?
Yeah. I mean, the person who got me interested in like even considering the Bible again was Jordan Peterson. And he gave me this aspect of not reading it literally, which is the way that I read the Bible,
yes.
before back in the day. That's just how I was taught to read the Bible. All that's exactly how it happened,
Yep.
you know? And now I just have like a much more, I have a weirder view and understanding of what happened in the Bible, the things that happened in the Bible.
Yeah.
I think that they both like did happen that way and didn't happen that way, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it.
Well, I think Jordan Peterson helps you understand how there's ways in which that can be true. Both can be true.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
And I agree with you. Jordan Peterson did that to me too.
Orthodoxy has that element, like, you know, the I don't know, psychological element, and they like a philosophical tradition too, with all the church fathers. I mean, these saints and people are basically philosophers. I mean, you know, they're like fleshing out the ideas in the Bible, because you know, a big mess with Protestantism is that you have every Tom, Dick, and Harry reading the Bible, interpreting it however they want to. And I think that the lineage of the Orthodox Church in the interpretations of the Bible, I think that that's very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I got mixed feelings about it, but I 100% agree that, like, it's so funny, man. This like radical individualist side of me wants to agree, just theoretically, that everybody having access to the Bible and having their own opinions of the Bible is a net positive. You know, because you should have the freedom to interpret it on your own. We should benefit from all the different opinions, you know?
Yeah. See, that is, last night I had brought up a podcast that I listened to with that guy, Matt Erickson, and another guy named Adam Patrick. And they talk about, and I was talking to you about this last night, it's the word phronema. And it basically, the best translation that I can give for you is worldview. And the Eastern worldview, that idea of the individual, it's not a thing. It's not like as strong as it is in the West. So that contributes to the faith.
It absolutely does, man. That's an interesting thing, because you see there's lots of overlap with Orthodoxy that I see with like Eastern types of ways of thinking that you don't see in Catholicism. And we talked about that apophatic thing, that trying to understand God by what he isn't. That's a very Eastern thing. There's a lot of this Eastern stuff that Orthodoxy seems to be sympathetic to that you just don't see. I did not see in Christianity ever. And it's interesting to me, man. You know, this whole logos idea is also very interesting, because that's big in Orthodoxy, understanding logos. In our Bible, we call that word, and you never hear the word logos.
What does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean? It doesn't matter. Just it means word. Keep reading.
Yeah.
You know?
God is with, like, you know how text flies across screens? It's just like God with a word, just like flying through nothing over the waters.
Yeah.
What does it mean? What does it all mean, Basil?
So this is interesting. So logos, this idea of logos ties in with this philosophical tradition that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And David Patrick Harry, who you introduced me to, talks about the history of the idea of logos, and it's pretty interesting. One of the things that was surprising to me, that I really want to like figure out where the sources are and read it myself, because it's really fascinating to me. He said that Heraclitus, this ancient pre-Socratic philosopher, one of the OG thinkers of the Western world, he said that the logos is that which unites opposites. And the hair stands up on my arms. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Because it's more than that. But that was one of the first things that he described. Heraclitus described it, the logos, to be. And the logos beyond that is the principle of order. It's the divine order of nature, the thing that patterns the world, the thing that patterns our experience and makes order out of chaos. All that Petersonian shit that I just said. But that's what struck me, is because Jordan Peterson, in his book Maps of Meaning, talks about our earliest myths and what the symbolism is in the myths. And I fucking eat that shit up. I love that shit. I'm like, Dan Brown me, Jordan, Dan Brown me.
Yeah.
And that's what he says when he tells the story of the Sumerian creation story with the primordial god and goddess, Tiamat and Apsu, and their opposites. Tiamat is the feminine, Apsu is the masculine. Tiamat is the salt water, Apsu is the fresh water, but they're in union and this cosmic egg. That's what's there in the beginning, the round chaos, the thing that we reference when we talk about the yin and the yang, or the Ouroboros. That's the word Jordan Peterson will use. The serpent swallowing its tail. That's that symbol. It's the symbol of the self-created, the unborn. It's that kind of shit. And he says that Ouroboros symbol is the union of opposites. And what does that mean? Because when you take a positive and a negative and you put it together, what do you have? It seems like you have nothing. But no, not to Jordan Peterson. You've got something there that's like potential. You've got something there that's God, and it's hard to understand. But whatever it is, it unifies opposites. It's the thing that you get when opposites are in union. And Jordan uses the symbol, and I've talked about this before, of the masculine and the feminine coming together. Look, it looks like a sexual act. The masculine and feminine come together, if you know what I mean, sir.
I do.
And there's all kinds of slapping noises, and
Yep.
Anyway, when that happens, what happens? It's a creative act, isn't it?
Yeah.
And this is what happens in the symbol of the Ouroboros. And then you got Heraclitus coming around and saying the logos. That's the thing that unifies opposites. That's the thing that was there in the beginning. That's God. And the fucking hair stands up on my arms, and I'm like, there's something to that that's deeply significant, man. And that's not present in the church we grew up in, or any church I've ever been to. Not present. Yep. Why? Why would you leave that out?
I don't know. I think it's misinterpretations of, I think it's, like I said, that you have these people who have they're just reading the Bible. They're just like a regular dude reading the Bible. You can interpret it a million different ways, and I just think it leads to a bunch of crazy shit, basically.
So are you elitist then, Kyle? You want to have a priestly class? You want to have somebody that controls our access to information, spiritual information?
I mean, I don't like the Bible, and the church fathers are there for you to read, like you can still, it's not what, I don't know. How is that controlled?
This analogy is like exactly like Plato's philosopher king analogy. It's like, if you can have somebody who's an authority on the meaning of the Bible and can help you interpret it in, like the best possible way, and has your best interest at heart, and is open-minded about spirituality, and everything lines up perfectly, that guy controlling access to the scripture and its interpretation will be awesome. But as soon as that guy is an asshole, as soon as that guy, isn't perfect, as soon as that guy, wants to manipulate you or doesn't quite know his shit, it had a bad day, then it becomes an obstacle.
But the church is more than one person. I mean, it's that's one big benefit that I see for Orthodoxy in contrast to Catholicism. It's like you got one guy who's basically calling. I mean, I guess there's some level of checks and balances too, but I mean, he's like the vicar of Christ or whatever. He's like, and I think the Pope thing, the way that he acts with like complete authority, I think a lot of Orthodox people say that comes from like a mistranslation of scripture, like probably a deliberate one. But maybe not. I don't know.
Do you remember when we talked about Dan Brown earlier? This might be just my misinterpretation, but you remember when Dan Brown was talking about Peter, Petros, Peter being the rock that the church was built upon, and the scripture makes it out that play on words. Peter is the rock, and his name means rock, and we're going to build the church on it. He's the cornerstone, the foundation. He's the guy, and that gives Peter the authority that none of the other characters had. It gives him special authority. And there's people that say that's not a legitimate interpretation, or that even this is the rock that the church was built on, even that passage was not authentic. Like it seemed like Dan Brown was playing with the idea that maybe that is what the Catholics have been resting their authority on all this time is not
Some
true.
misinterpretation.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, so I know that in church history you had, Christianity obviously started in Israel and then started spreading, and eventually it had spread pretty far. And you had like, I don't know, like 5, 6, big city centers that had big populations of Christians, and all of those places had like a patriarch. They all had like their own pope at one point, and then things happened, Muslim invasions. Then there's not really that many Christians, and eventually it got down to where it was just Rome and Constantinople. And yeah, I don't know. I think it was it obviously had something to do with political, things on some level. The Pope started, Rome had a lot of power, and they did have they do have I guess an honor, like an honored place in the church. They're considered like the first among equals. That's what the Orthodox considered them up until the schism. Like you're a patriarch, we're a patriarch, and you do have an honored place, but you're not like telling us what to do. You can't, especially you can't tell us to violate the faith. You're not the boss. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, especially because I don't know which I know there's like different Orthodox churches, and I don't know all the details, but certain of the Orthodox churches are given special permission by the Catholic Church to partake in communion in Catholic Church.
Yeah, I think I heard that the Greeks are allowed to.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Like, you guys are close enough. You can have our crackers and juice.
Yeah.
You can share our crackers and juice. And it's not even, see, that's how fucking Protestant I am. I just said crackers and juice.
Crackers and juice, man. I know that in Catholicism and Protestant religion, they use the unleavened bread.
Mm-hmm.
In Orthodox, they use one that is, risen with yeast.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those interesting differences, like transubstantiation and consubstantiation, or like being baptized by submersion versus sprinkling. It's like whole branches of Christianity split off on those things.
Yeah.
So what happened here? Say it again. What was the example you just brought up?
I don't even know what you're talking about.
God damn it. This is the problem of starting a podcast on daylight savings time when I haven't.
Example of what I was talking. What?
Oh, about some small difference in
the bread.
Oh, the bread. Excuse me. Yeah. So, do you know the reason?
No, I have no idea. I have no idea.
Wouldn't that be funny if that's what split the Orthodox Church, the Eastern and Western Roman Empire?
Yeah, I think I don't remember specifically, but I think the Great Schism might have had to do with the Nicene Creed. And you asked on Twitter the other day if the Holy Spirit was God's essence or whether it was one of his energies. Mm-hmm. And from my understanding, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are all of the same essence. One essence, 3 persons.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean.
So you think that the essence?
I think what may have been the thing that caused the schism was a reinterpretation of that. Like they amended the Nicene Creed to say that the Holy Spirit emanated from the Father and the Son.
Oh, yeah.
And it only emanates from the Father, according to, I think that's right.
So I asked that question on Twitter for a reason.
Yeah, I figured you weren't just.
It goes something like this. When the Orthodox talk about theosis, when they talk about becoming God, what they say is that human beings can participate in God's energies, like we talked about love and compassion, those kind of things. And when we're acting that way, we're acting as God on earth, something like that. And that can be, presumably, you get better and better at that. And you get higher and higher spiritually elevated in doing that to some point that becomes some kind of enlightenment, some kind of nirvana type experience is the way it kind of seems to me. But they're really strict about this idea that you don't actually become God. You participate in God, in a way that's different than an ordinary existence. And okay, maybe that's interesting. But the idea is you don't share in the essence of God because you aren't God. the Father kind of thing. And I understand that. But if the Spirit that was on the face of the waters in the book of Genesis, if the Spirit of God, if that is the Logos, if that is the Holy Spirit, as according to, Orthodox dogma, if
I
that's
think in Orthodox dogma, the Logos is specifically Christ.
Okay. Okay, so let me just get this out here. If the Spirit of God is the essence of God, I think the Bible tells a story about this, the breath of God, the Spirit of God being breathed into Adam, becoming Adam's own soul. The Spirit of God becomes the spirit of man. And that's the essence of God, not the energies, because that's the Holy Spirit. And if that's the case, then human being essence of God. The argument that I will when I my next episode, and I just wonder how an Orthodox person would engage with that idea. I'm stretching a little bit when I say that the Spirit of God that was there in the beginning is the breath that's breathed from God into Adam, into the clay form of Adam that makes Adam alive. But I think an argument can be made that's the case. Then you skip forward to John and you talk about the Word in the flesh being Jesus, and I don't see it. I don't see a distinction between what animates a human being, the soul of God, and what Jesus represents, the soul of God, the Spirit of God. I don't see a difference. So I want to argue that way, but I just, again, very curious what an Orthodox person would say to that idea.
Yeah, I wish that I was more informed, more, my understanding of things was better so that I could, speak with any kind of authority. But I do have a gift for you that might help with that.
Oh shit!
Here you go.
Oh shit! Oh shit! Sorry about that.
Knocking the whole
it feels like a book.
It feels like a book.
What do we got here? Oh shit! This is dope, man. The Orthodox Study Bible.
It's a good one, man.
Very cool, man.
Same one that I got.
Oh, God bless you, man. That's awesome.
It's good. It's the official Orthodox translation. It's got it's got a lot of annotations from the church fathers down at the bottom of the pages.
That's interesting.
Yep.
That is interesting.
I read it every day.
Thanks, man. That's pretty cool. Kyle's trying to convert me over here.
I am too. No, I just want to. I mean, if you're interested, I had actually bought that before you told me that you were interested yesterday. So I was like, all right.
Very cool. Right. Yeah. So you've got the exact same one, huh?
Same one, yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I would be interested. Like there's certain passages that I think are really weird and interesting that are Greek or Hebrew. And when you read like King James, which is what I'm accustomed to doing, you never know what those words mean. Like logos is a good example. I would never even have heard it. And I don't know, I would never know that in John, when it says in the beginning was the word, that means anything more than a spoken word. Mm-hmm. I would never have any way of understanding that maybe that means something more.
Yeah, I guess in Protestantism specifically, there's big emphasis put on the Bible. It's sola scriptura. It's like that's all you need is the word. So I don't know if they imagine that the Bible always existed. That's the word to them.
See,
just how do they conceptualize the word? Yeah. What does that mean?
So this is I don't mean to derail, but there's a show that I brought up, a miniseries that I brought up based on a book many times. It's called Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. You remember me bringing this up?
Yeah.
It's about wizards like in the Napoleonic Europe, and they bring back magic that's been extinct forever. And it's an interesting story, but there's a character in the story. His name is Vinculus. Vinculus is a street magician. He's like a vagrant. He's a vagabond. He's a beggar, basically. And he lives on the streets and he begs for money and he tells people their fortunes and he sells people, like spells and shit. But he can't really do any magic. He's a vagabond. He's just this is what he does. This is his game. But really he is kind of like a magical person. And it's sort of hidden even from himself. But over the course of the story, you find out the reason is that his father had a book of magic, a very ancient, rare book. It was written by the Raven King. And the Raven King is like the OG wizard from way back when. It's like Godric Gryffindor. And nobody else has this book. And he gambles the book away, I think, the father. and he gets, I don't remember the details. He gets cursed basically, and I think he ends up eating the book. He eats it maybe like on a dare. I don't remember. But when Vinculus is born, after this happens, the words of the book are all tattooed all over the baby. So he ate the book. His dad ate the book, and when he had the son later on, the words of the book were all over the body of the kid. And so when Vinculus grows up, he's just covered in tattoos of magical script, you know? And when we say the word made flesh, this is the image that pops in my head. Like Jesus Christ covered in the Bible.
Just a tatted up baby.
Just a tatted up baby Jesus.
Yeah.
And
you need like praying hands.
You need all the real estate, which means face tattoos too. It's a lot. There's a lot of Bible to tattoo. Oh God, yeah.
On you, you know, it's gonna have to be some small print if you're a baby too.
Yeah.
Not a lot of surface area.
I wonder if the word made flesh, if that like biblical imagery was intended by the author. Now I wonder.
A tatted up baby.
You know, Vinculus was the book made flesh, and I wonder if that idea
was calling back to the Bible.
I wonder.
Maybe
Susanna Clark, is that her?
I think I have that on Audible. I haven't listened to it though.
You should listen to it, man.
Yeah,
it's one of my favorite. I don't read a lot of fiction, but I love Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. It's fucking good, man.
Yeah, you always spoke highly of it, which is why I have it.
It's like Harry Potter for grown-ups, and it's a little bit dry, you know.
Yeah,
it's very British.
Yep.
So you gotta, you know, if you like the British, you'll love it.
I do like. I like some British stuff. I specifically like a show. I think it's from like the 70s called "Are You Being Served?" It's a great show.
Yeah.
For anybody, it's probably on YouTube.
Is it comedy?
Yeah, it's a comedy about a bunch of people who work in a department store.
Interesting.
A haberdashery.
Oh, so Are You Being Served is like, how can I help you in Great Britain? Yeah, interesting. Dude, this is a really nice gift, man. I'm very grateful. Thank you, man.
There's a cover for it. It just looks better without it, so I figured I could give it to you that way.
That's cool, man. I do like that. So one of the other things that I wanted to talk to you about.
Oh, you should flip through it. There's a bunch of it's got what are they called? The word slipping.
Oh shit!
The icons.
That is cool, man. It sure does.
Yeah, it's a good looking Bible.
Oh, how'd it go?
Can't get it in there.
Yeah, icons, cool. Very cool.
Yeah, man. I'm sorry, what were you saying? Something you wanted to talk about?
I was just gonna talk about Christian mystics. So as I've been getting into this Orthodox stuff and the Logos stuff, I'm just trying to get on the same page as Kyle, so we can talk about something that you're interested in. I came across a lot of interesting characters from Christianity that I never heard of, or I didn't spend any time like getting familiar with. Like we just talked about some of them, you know, Clement and Athanasius and Irenaeus and all kinds of names that I've heard but never really paid any attention to. And some of these people are very mystical, and they have, like some of those quotes I read, they have a lot of quotes that are so much more up my alley that I never would have expected from the mouth of a Christian. Specifically a Christian. I never would, because we're so hung up in this country from this old Puritan religious style that poo-poos drugs and anything taboo. And because this type of like stuff is so linked to psychedelic experience, it's hard to imagine a Puritan group ever coming up with them. And that's what happened. You know, you don't ever hear that shit here. But then I listened to somebody like Meister Eckhart, who wasn't an early church father. He was like in the Middle Ages, like late Middle Ages or whatever. But he wrote all kinds of sermons and was hugely popular. And he had like some high teaching post in the Catholic Church and was very respected. And at the very end of his life, the Catholic Church was like, you know, you're a little bit too blasphemous to live. So they put him on trial, and we're going to have him killed. And he died before, you know, the trial was over, which is very sad. But up until that point, he was like a very highly respected teacher and theologian. And that dude is so mystical. That dude says this kind of shit that I say from psychedelic insight. And he says it from spiritual insight. He says it from, I don't know what the origin. I would love to know what the origin of Meister Eckhart's mystical, thoughts, ideas come from, because I don't think that guy was doing drugs. I think the early Christians were doing drugs, but I don't think Meister Eckhart was doing drugs. Maybe he was. I don't know. You
I
think
don't
you
know
think
either.
people like Nostradamus and like those sorts of people were doing psychedelics?
I don't know. That would be a question for David Patrick Harry. I mean, you know, he specifically got into Orthodoxy studying. So I wonder if he found any evidence of psychedelic, you know, in early Orthodox Church. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I this is something that we've talked about on here that I've been feeling for a long time, is that I don't think you're going to get the fullness of the message through just the psychedelics.
Yeah.
But there's no denying that it, like, if you're not thinking about it and you have a good mushroom trip, you might start thinking about it, you know.
Yeah. Oh
It
yeah.
can change the
100%.
way that you see the world.
That's what it does. That's exactly what it does.
Yeah.
But changing the way you see the world can be a catalyst for spirituality. I mean,
Mhm.
it's not difficult.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know, man. I did have some, like, the earlier mushroom trips that I had, maybe they didn't like blast me off completely, but I feel like they did maybe start. I took them with the intention of having that happen. I just didn't take enough, so I didn't, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Pussy.
but then, like, well, I just didn't know, you know. Um, but then later in life, when I you know, I got my hands on some LSD and things like that, um, I had I did the damn thing. I had the experience, bought the ticket, took the ride.
Yeah. So have you? I know you must have seen or at least heard about those like frescoes in France. I think they are these, like, you know, not particularly early, but early Christian art that shows, like, you know, Adam and Eve in the garden and the trees and mushrooms,
Shrooms,
or,
yeah.
you know, there's different images of Jesus with mushrooms. There's some evidence that up until, let's say, like maybe even in the Middle Ages, there might have been some psychedelic use associated with Christianity.
Yeah, I know that. But what I mean, that I would like to ask David Patrick Harry is, like, in your readings of the Church Fathers, did you find anything that even maybe not explicitly is like, I took, you know, 5 dried grams of
Yeah,
mushrooms,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
but like, is there anything in there that might lead you to believe that, aside from the mystic stuff? Because the mystic stuff could be arrived at through other
Yeah,
means, you
yeah.
know. So
Yeah, the only thing that, and this isn't going to be news to you, but the only thing that comes to my mind is that the tradition, and David Patrick Harry studied this. He studied esotericism and mysticism and shamanism. So, you know, like the mystery religions and all that stuff. He knows about that stuff.
yeah,
There's a psychedelic tradition from Eleusis there that goes back all the way to the, you know, pre-Socratic Greece, where like people like Socrates and Plato were believed to have partaken in the Eleusinian mysteries, where they almost certainly did psychedelics. Those were the guys that first came up with the idea of logos, which I'm going to start saying
logos.
logos now because it does seem like the right way of pronouncing it.
Yeah, if you're one of those people who, like, I mean, I am an annoying person. I fully am aware of that. But, like, I don't say Macedonia generally. I say Macedonia. Just, I'm a dick. I'm
Yeah,
a pretentious asshole,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
I like to say things the way um, that the people say them there, you know? Like, you know, a little while ago, there was a big deal about, I think it was during the soccer thingy. Um, Iran. People were like, you know, and they're like, it's Iran.
Iran.
And, you know, that's how I say it
Would you rather visit, if you could go on vacation?
a lot of the
Would
time.
you rather visit Cuba or Mexico?
I would most likely go to
Yeah,
Cuba.
the answer is Cuba, but I just wanted to say Cuba and
Yeah.
Mexico.
Why would you, just like wanting the actual logic behind that answer?
Oh,
It would just be more interesting to go to Cuba.
well, there's really two things that come to my mind. First thing is, I just hear way too much shit about Mexico being dangerous to tourists.
I mean, I would assume that Cuba's probably dangerous too.
I just haven't heard so much
Yeah,
about it.
I guess that's true.
The other thing about Cuba is that it's kind of like locked in time.
Yeah.
It's like if you ever go to, like, there's a place called Mackinac Island, which is I don't know if I think it's in Michigan, but right before you get to Canada, and you go onto this island, and the island doesn't allow cars. So when you go there, it's like a place locked in time. All the houses have stables for horses, and if you want to get around, that's what you fucking have.
Horse.
Horses or maybe they have like golf carts and shit that they drive around.
I don't think they should let that. No golf carts. You gotta fucking
You
walk.
you gotta shovel horse shit.
Yeah, dude.
But it's something like that. Like Cuba seems like it's just locked in the 50s. You know, all the cars are from the 50s. It just seems like you're going back in time, you know?
I know that the means that brought them to that situation where they have to have like old cars and fix them continually. I know that the means that got them there are not great, but I do like the end goal, you know, or I like some certain things about the end. Like I like the idea of having a car forever.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It's pretty neat, man.
Yeah. I've said before, but I've got a strong preference now of quality over quantity. When I was younger, it was much more about quantity. Now I'm like way shifting in the other direction. So if I'm gonna buy like a shirt, you know, like I'm gonna have this shirt for the rest of my life. You know, I don't need a variety. You know, I don't need one in every color. Just give me a good shirt. You know,
I think that there's something to. I wish that I convinced myself with just having like the same thing all the time, you know,
like Homer Simpson.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
But like Steve Jobs, I mean, I don't want Steve Jobs' outfit. The black turtleneck and the jeans, that's not my look. But I do like that. The idea of just like, I've got this thing, I'm comfortable in it every day. Just, I don't think about it at all.
Yeah. Can you imagine being so busy and so productive that you're like, look, I can't be choosing my clothes every day.
Yeah.
It has to be ready when I get up.
Yeah. And that is not it for me. Like I've got plenty of time to plan my outfits out, but I just don't want to.
Listen, man, I think people have to do some artistic things. And if you don't, even little artistic things, I think people I think it's like a necessity, like oxygen. Yeah. And so picking out your outfit for me, like that's a tiny little artistic choice because I have, lots of different combinations, but I get to select the combinations. I get like, do you ever see those? You ever see I know you have, but the Sherlock Holmes movies with Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah.
I fucking love them, by the way. You know how like when Robert Downey Jr. is getting ready to fuck somebody up, it like freeze frames and time slows down and it's like lights up every area and how it's going to happen. I was going to make that analogy for whatever it was I was just talking about, but I forgot what I was talking about.
Damn,
what was I talking about before this? Ah, shit.
I don't remember.
Fuck. My fault, guys.
You get on these tears.
I do.
It's early too.
It is early. Yep.
I don't have any excuse. I'm just like not thinking fast enough.
Yeah.
So
I've always been a fast talker when I was a kid,
Yeah.
Very, very fast talker. I've gotten better about it, but I can still get going.
Dude, your voice when you got older, like deepened,
Mm-hmm.
But when you were young, you were kind of Shapiro-esque, You're like,
yeah. I was going to say Alvin, like not Alvin and the Chipmunks. Yeah, kind of like Alvin and the Chipmunks, but Shapiro, yeah, that's a good comparison.
Yeah.
But it used to be that my brain would keep up with my mouth. Sometimes my brain would even get ahead of it. But as I get older, man, the brain slows down and the mouth just keeps going. So I run into obstacles sometimes.
True.
It's the brain's trying to keep up.
Especially when you are stupid and talk on you go on the internet and talk in front of people.
Yeah.
Because you're, like I said, stupid.
Yeah. Thanks,
That's
buddy.
me. No, not you. Me. I'm talking about me.
Let's see. Oh yeah, there's a couple things. I don't really know. Like, this isn't gonna like flow in any particular way, but there's a couple things that I wrote down recently that I can bring up to you. I did a couple episodes of the podcast recently. One of them was called "Nothing Matters" with Michio Kaku, and the one before that was "Nothing Matters" with Alan Watts.
Alan Watts.
So I'm actually reading an Alan Watts book now, and I have a quote in here that's really interesting. This book I want to talk about, it's interesting, but I came across this.
Curious Cosmology.
Yes, that was a recommendation from a Twitter friend. So anyway, I didn't have this piece of information when I did those Nothing Matters episodes, but then I came across it, and I'm like, fuck, I wish I would have known this. I could have put it in. So I like to talk about physics and shit I don't really understand, I just understand it enough that I find it interesting and I want to talk about it, but I'm not an expert You know, I don't know the fucking math. And so I don't really know what I'm talking about. But every now and then that shit will come up that I just have to talk about it, even though I'm out of school. So I came across this thing. It's called the Wheeler-Dewitt equation. The Wheeler is John Wheeler, and DeWitt is
Michael DeWitt.
DeWitt, I don't know. But really famous physicist. And this formula proves that the net energy in the cosmos is zero.
Okay. The net energy?
The net energy in the cosmos is zero.
Okay.
So, again, this is where I'm going to be stepping in over my head, and this is all probably nonsense, but basically what that means is there is no energy in the universe.
Or it means that, like, there's an equal amount of, like, positive and negative.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean,
yeah. Yep.
So there is energy, but at the end of the day, it's just all canceled out.
Correct. So there's a way that you can see it as though there is no energy in the universe. It's this very strange thing. It's like you have nothing, but when you split it into two, negative and positive, then you have something. As soon as they come together, got nothing again. Zero net energy. It's fucking fascinating. So there's this idea of zero net energy. Where was I going with this? Damn it, I had some.
Zero net energy.
Well, it's related to these ideas I talked about on this podcast, because there's this thing called 0 point energy.
Yeah.
And the idea that even at the lowest, like at the lowest possible energy levels, there's always a little bit of vibration in the quantum field. You can't get rid of it. So there is no such thing as nothing, basically, was the whole point of that. But anyway, this whole Wheeler-Dewitt thing blew my mind, that there's a real way of looking at at material reality as an illusion. I know what I was going to say. The net energy is zero, and if we remember Einstein telling us that energy and matter are the same thing, E equals mc squared. So energy can become matter, and matter can become energy. That's what an atomic bomb is, right? When you take matter and you turn it back into raw energy, boom! Energy and matter are the same thing, and the net energy in the cosmos is zero. That means that the net matter in the cosmos is zero, doesn't it?
We live in the matrix.
We live in the fucking matrix. I just think that's really interesting. It's like, what does that mean? There's no matter and energy in some real way. And there's something that happens that separates the nothingness from itself, and that results in the material cosmos and the laws of physics. It's fucking mind-blowing. So I wish I could have included that in those Nothing Matters episodes.
Well, addendum. You can always make a third.
Just going to be about the Wheeler-Dewitt equation.
Yeah.
It's going to be a very short episode.
About 15 minutes. Sometimes I think, especially now that we're doing stuff on YouTube, that's a good, interesting, like 15-minute video. Right. Especially if you can like manipulate the screen, if you can like put things up. And,
100%.
Which you could figure out.
I can figure it out for sure.
Yeah.
So you got no other thoughts on that? That the net energy in the cosmos is zero? It's one of those mysteries, man.
Yeah, something about the idea of reality being illusory, like I don't like it. But another part of me thinks that there may be some level of truth to it, I don't know.
No, I'm right there with you. I can't deny my own reality.
Yeah.
I think that there's a paradox there, man. And you can either write them off when you bump into a paradox. You can either write, this is an unsolvable problem, and why am I wasting my time thinking about that? Or when you see it bump into a paradox, you can just say, what the fuck is going on here? Let's dive into this thing. Let's figure this thing out. I'm more of the latter type of person.
Yeah.
Not that I ever figure anything out, but I like trying. It's fun.
Yep. I used to feel more like that. I'm still not like 100% opposed to figuring it out. But I do think I've become more and more interested in like the practical, you know. I don't know. That's just the best way to, just the practical, like the putting into action, you know,
Yeah.
and the meaning of, I guess, how you should behave in the world to some degree. But also, I do, the spiritual element comes into like why you are doing that. You know, that's so it's not like there's, we talked earlier about Jordan Peterson being the person who like kind of made the ideas of the Bible interesting to him, but Jordan Peterson, I do think, comes to it from too much of a pragmatic, approach.
Yeah.
And I know that's just his. My approach is not like strictly pragmatic. I think that it's not just about the results that you get from it.
Yeah.
Like the practical results.
So are you saying like when Jordan says he won't come out and say he's a Christian, but he acts as though God exists because by acting as though God exists, he believes that's.
Yeah, I don't think that's enough at the end of the day. I do think that you have to believe, you have to have faith. That's a huge part of it. Like you can say, I'm living the principles, all that, and you might well be, you might 100% be living the most perfect Christian existence imaginable. But if you don't have faith, you're not. That's, to my understanding, anyways.
Yeah.
Acts alone, like you can't do. There's a school of thought that you can just have faith, and once you've had the faith, your actions don't really matter. You don't have to act it out. And then there's the acts alone, which is like basically what I just described.
Yep.
It takes both.
Yeah, absolutely. So Martin Luther, I believe, was the one that said faith without works is dead. Was it Martin Luther?
I think so.
Might have been Calvin, one of those guys.
One of those fellows.
Faith without works is dead. So in like with the church we grew up in, it's really about faith. So you're required to have faith, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, it's like they did encourage, the churches that I went to when I was young, the people would do things where they were very Christian. They acted it out, but that like wasn't. It was just like encouraged because it's like a nice thing to do. It's not like a part of it. It's not like that is your salvation.
Right.
The doing of it is what saves you. I've heard David Patrick Harry explain it, that when you sin, you're like killing yourself. You are the energy of God. And when you sin, you're, like killing that energy. And then when you do the acts, you are energizing yourself, and that you become more alive and more like God. So,
well, that's just one of those things, like that's an experiment you need to have. You need to say, I'm just going to change my perspective and my behavior for a while and see how I feel,
Yep.
And that's very hard to do, man.
So I do think that is one element of like the Jordan Peterson approach, that the pragmatic it does help. It's not like it's completely worthless, because I think if a person is living just like a miserable existence and they start living, they're like, okay, starting tomorrow, I'm really going, even though I don't believe, even though I don't have faith, I'm going to start living like a Christian. I think that their life will get better.
Yep.
And then you start to believe.
Yeah. That's a path. That's definitely a path.
Yeah.
Yep.
For sure.
Yeah, people are skeptical, and that's not a bad thing. So sometimes that's how you have to get into it. Another quote that goes along with this Wheeler-Dewitt equation is by Max Planck.
Max Planck.
Max Planck.
Max Planck.
Again, one of the OG quantum physicists. He said, the mind is the matrix of all matter. He says, there is no matter as such. The mind is the matrix of all matter. That's some hippy dippy shit that could come from a psychonaut, that could come from ancient Indian philosophy. But it didn't. It came from Max Planck, the most sober scientist known to man.
There is this point where the scientists start sounding like mystics, It's like you're basically a shaman.
Now, what do you make of that? Do you think that's a coincidence, or do you think that's a convergence?
I forget where I heard it. it was in some, I'm sure it was a Crucible debate. I heard they were debating something about atheism, but they said that they're debating the decline of the West being linked to atheism or something like that. And I lost the thread. Fucking A, man. Well, it's a bad episode for that.
Yeah. It's early, and it's Daylight Savings Day.
Yeah, maybe I'm more tired than I realize.
Whilst we're talking about the Crucible, I'll just say Kyle sent me another Crucible to listen to, which is Richie and Beckett having a conversation about government nationalism.
I thought you were going to talk about Ryan versus Jim Bob, but go ahead.
Oh, yeah, we can talk about that if you want to. But no, the reason I wanted to bring up this one is because I've listened to, and I haven't listened to them all the way, but I've sampled pretty good chunks of 3 of those debates. And the first 2 I listened to, I had kind of a similar feeling about. Like, I felt like it was pretty one-sided, and I wasn't going to watch somebody get beat up on for 3 hours. I wasn't going to watch the whole thing. And so I kind of just tapped out of both of those episodes. But then this last one, it was actually a good matchup, on both sides, so that the conversation really seemed to be just bouncing back and forth, and interesting to see how sides were trying to, but it was a very different experience listening to this last one, and so I don't know. I don't know what exactly makes a difference to me between the first 2 and this one, but that's what I'm pointing to. Like, it was interesting to me. It kept my attention. I didn't feel like on those first 2 episodes, I felt like I was watching somebody get beat up, and when they were already unconscious, just kept getting beat up. And I'm the kind of person that I am walking away, man. I don't want to watch this anymore, if that makes any sense. And this last episode wasn't like that. It was I liked it, man. I thought it was more like that. I need to see more like that.
Got it.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah. I like that one a lot. So when you say the other 2, you're talking about Andrew versus the vegan fella,
George Martin. Yep.
Yeah. And Jim Bob versus Ryan.
Jim Bob versus Ryan, which the topic of that one was
like right up your alley.
Are we God?
Ryan. Yeah, let's talk about that.
Okay,
I mean, so you said that you liked Ryan's opening statement.
Yeah. So they give him like 7 minutes to do an opening statement, and Ryan was on the pro side of this argument. He believes we're all God. Everything is God. Yeah. And here's the thing about Ryan: he admits readily that he has no experience as a debater. That he is he works on a family farm in Canada. So he's a blue collar guy.
He's fucking Letterkenny.
He's basically Letterkenny, but a smart guy, and a guy that understood what he understood. He gets it. He gets the whole mystical thing, but he couldn't really articulate it that well.
You think Ryan's getting his mushrooms off of like cow patties?
Yeah,
he's a cow farmer.
I imagine he is. Yeah, I like to imagine he is.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, he seemed like a smart guy, and he had prepared that
He's
intro.
Not an idiot.
No. And what he read in the intro sounded great, but then once his prepared writing was done, and Jim Bob starts asking him questions, it got very difficult very quickly.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you noticed that quote from the Bible that I read earlier about in God we live and move and have our being. Ryan quoted that same passage. Yeah,
make that connection.
Yep, in his intro he did.
Yeah, when I saw that debate was happening, I was like, I'm going to send that one over.
That was the right choice. Yeah. Absolutely, I'm interested in that.
Yeah, Jim Bob just kind of manhandled Ryan though.
Yeah, so when Ryan had his intro, and then it was time for Jim Bob to have his intro.
Jim Bob's like, let me at this guy.
He was just like, no, I'm gonna forfeit my intro and go right at him. Yeah. And from that point on, it was a series of questions by Jim Bob. There's almost no questions from Ryan. It was
at one point Andrew intervenes and is like, let's let Ryan do some questioning here.
Yeah. And did he look better when he started asking questions?
I don't think that he did a great job of like making his argument. I think, but like I said, I think that Jim Bob is just a better debater.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether you believe who you believe, I think that Jim Bob is just a more skilled debater.
Sure.
But
you once said to me that those conversations never go well for the people who take the mystical side of the argument. And I saw
generally don't.
And I saw that play out with Ryan. But I understand why too. It's not easy to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're having like a very patient conversation, it's not easy to talk about.
I can understand being in your seat, being frustrated by it, because they're not easy things to talk about. And Ryan didn't do a good job of forcing Jim Bob to let him talk about them.
He's too nice. He's Canadian.
Yeah. I also think, though, that while I don't think that you are ever going to be able to understand God with logic and reason, I think that God exceeds our logic and reason, like very clearly. I do think that using logic to like weed things out is useful, and I think that's what Jim Bob was doing.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, I don't think that Jim Bob was like just trying to set up like rhetorical traps. I don't think he was being bad faith. I think that Jim Bob was making honest arguments.
He was trying to get Ryan to agree with premises so that he could lead him to
why he's wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Contradicting himself or something like that.
Yeah. And so that was one of those debates where I was actually particularly interested in the conversation. Are we God? And it was one of those things where I was pretty much yelling in my head, like, say this, say that, don't say that, don't do it that way.
Yeah.
So I wish I could have been in his fucking ear.
You want to debate Jim Bob?
I could have that conversation. We could have that conversation again. What I'm afraid of is the same thing will happen to me. I mean, I would do a better job than Ryan. There's no doubt in my mind I'll do a better job than Ryan. But what I'm afraid of is it is difficult to talk about, and it requires, like, how often do I tell a story to make a little point? It happens all the time. How often do I have to use an analogy to make a simple point? And it's like it's a lot to ask of the audience. It's a lot to ask of the audience,
Well, I mean, I think that people who are listening to a debate, that's your audience. That's your target audience, I do think that, in a debate, sometimes someone might have to be like, you're rambling, you got to like make this more concise.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is hard.
It's hard, especially when you're talking about that. And it's full of paradox. And that's the thing that I said to you is like in the very beginning of that debate, they shouldn't have had opening arguments. They should have just said, let's define our terms. If we're going to talk about being God, let's decide and agree on what God means. Just have that conversation. That is hard enough to have.
Yeah.
I try to have that conversation a lot, like online, and it's so hard. People, I don't really understand it, actually. People are so dug into what they think God means. And if there's somebody who's written it off, like an atheist who's written it off as an idea that we use for psychological reasons, and it doesn't really mean anything, or for social control. I don't know where I was going. I lost my thread there. Golly.
We're gonna have to like title this episode something about losing a thread.
I got one more thing. If I can find it, I'll read to you. This book is called The Joyous Cosmology by Alan Watts. And basically what it is a series of his psychedelic experiences that he put into a kind of like a narrative form. So he tells you in the book that it's like many, many trips over a long period of time, but he puts them in the book, like he compiles them all down and makes it out like it's all happening over the course of one day. And like the chapters will start like, I went out to the garden and then this magical thing happened to me. Or I came back inside and started talking to the people in the house and this magical thing happened to me. And it's pretty interesting. I really like reading people's trip accounts and
trip accounts.
Yeah, trip accounts, and especially the like ones that are powerful and mystical. I like to listen to that. So like William James did a bunch of that in his book. Maurice Buck compiled a whole bunch of those from history, including like relatively modern people like poets and people that you would recognize their names, but also going back into ancient times and just hearing the similarities between what people talk about, over the course of time. It's clear that there's some human experience that's possible to have, that some people have, and all these people are talking about it in similar ways. Mm-hmm. So that's what Alan Watts does in this book, and he's Alan Watts has a way of talking that's nice.
Yeah.
So let me see if I can find.
Got a lot of highlighting in there. Fluorescent yellow.
Yep.
That is one reason that I like physical copies. Like I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and finding a quote in an audiobook is fucking hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Here we go. All right, he says, this is just a passage from the book. He says, "It is this vivid realization of the reciprocity of will and world, active and passive, inside and outside, self and not self, which evokes the aspect of these experiences that is most puzzling, the strange and seemingly unholy conviction that I am God. In Western culture, this sensation is seen as the very signature of insanity. But in India, it is simply a matter of course that the deepest center of man, Atman, and the deepest center of the universe, Brahman. Why not? Surely a continuous view of the world is more whole, more holy, more healthy than one in which there is a yawning emptiness between the cause and its effects. Obviously, the I, which is God, is not the ego." So I just thought when he said that's that strange and eerie realization comes upon you that I am God. And I was just like smiling ear to ear. I'm like, it's not just me. It's not just me,
it's
man.
It's me and Alan Watts.
It's me and Alan Watts. And the intro to this book was done by Dennis Leary and Richard Alpert.
Dennis Leary.
Timothy Leary, excuse me. Yeah, with this Dennis Leary, yeah. What'd you think?
Some heavy shit, man. So he said that something about there being a gap between
cause and effect. Yes.
I don't know. I don't know if you have to believe that everything is God to believe that there's not that gap. I think that there might be other ways that you like saying that there's a gap, that separation, there's like a negative implication, that he's clearly like intending. Yeah. And I think that you can get around that without there necessarily being everything being the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's one of those paradoxes that if everything is one, like the mystical people say, then how can there be differences? How can there be if everything is one?
It's all an illusion.
And I think from a Christian perspective, I think the answer to that is in the Bible. It's in Genesis. It's in the creation story when everything is separated from the beginning. In the beginning, everything is separated. The light from the darkness, the sky from the firmament, the woman from man. Everything is separated from something. Everything's separated from something, like it was once one thing, and everything gets separated off from it. So there is, even in the Bible, a separation of God from God, a separation within, a cleavage within God. And that cleavage is the distance that allows you to, it's the veil of perception. It's the distance necessary that allows God to experience itself, to look across the dissociative boundary, as Bernardo would say, to look across that cleavage and see that's the thing that I am. But now you can experience it. You can recognize it, and you couldn't when you were one. So some symbolically, some idea of separation is critical in creation. I think that's interesting. I don't know what it means. I don't know if that separation is real. I don't know if that separation is space and time, or if it's some kind of dissociative boundary. One idea that I've been playing with is this idea of form being that separation. I told you this before. It's like, my wife, she made cookies yesterday. It's like you put the dough down, and then you take your little form and you cut out all your cookies. And Plato talks about form like that in this very mystical
you can also
way.
do that with Plato.
You fuck. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. I wouldn't recommend eating those cookies, though.
Yeah, not good.
It reminds me of an episode of The Simpsons where the cop, Chief Wiggum, his son, who's, I can't remember his name. He's a couple of screws short of a, I don't know what the expression is. He's a dumb kid, and he gives his dad something that he made to eat, and his dad takes a bite out of the sandwich, and he's like, crunch, 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 and he looks up at his dad and he goes, "Can you taste the thumbtacks?" Where was I before I got into that? Fuck.
You were talking about cutting the cookie dough.
Yes. So something about form being the thing that separates God from itself. And this is what happens in the Bible too. When man is created, he's created as a clay form, and a form has boundaries. A form has edges. A form is separate from everything else. That's what makes it a form. It's a particular distinction, right? And whatever that is, Plato thought was very mystical. He thought forms were things that existed in your mind or in the noumenal realm, in the nous. That's what he called it, in the logos, actually.
The nous is what he said?
The nous, yeah.
That's something from Eastern Orthodox.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah. I don't really understand the difference between nous and logos exactly.
So, again, I don't know. But from my understanding, the nous is... like a word translation is the eye of the soul, like that. And of you, of your soul, that is the part that connects with the divine. So that's interesting to me, the idea that there are parts of your soul,
Oh yeah.
Like, what does that mean?
I don't know what that means. I'm skeptical of it.
Yeah.
But we've talked about that before, like from the ancient Egyptian symbolism, because in Egypt, the soul had all kinds of different parts. The Ka and the Ba are just two of them that I happen to know.
Yeah.
But one of them is associated with your personality, and one of them is associated with like the immortal animating spirit, and they all mean something different. And when you die, only part of that, I don't know what the hieroglyph has wings. I think it's like a face with wings. That part of you, your soul, gets to go to heaven, but the rest of you decays.
Yeah.
It's a very kind of Christian sounding concept, honestly.
One thing that's, I think, is interesting since I've been reading the Bible is that I'll read a passage of it, and between me reading it and my next reading of the Bible, I'll see things that applies to, or it will pop up in different weird ways. And I've been reading the Gospel of Luke for our Bible study, and I just finished chapter 5, and at the end of that, they're talking about fasting. Someone comes up to Jesus and he's like, John the Baptist's disciples fast, all the Pharisees and their disciples fast. Why don't your followers fast? And his answer was that, the way that Jesus talked, he said, you can't convince the friends of the bridegroom to fast while he's with them. In that, I don't like a bridegroom implies a wedding, and a wedding implies a celebration, and you can't like expect it. Basically Christ being with them. It was like a joyous, you're not going to fast during that. You don't need to.
Yeah.
But when he says that when the bridegroom is gone, then that's when you fast. And the point of that is that for you to connect with the Holy Spirit, whatever you conceptualize that as, that the nous, doing things like fasting and things like that, it's like it needs to be cleaned. It needs to be like reborn. It needs to be, I don't know what the best word for it is. But it needs to be like, it can be like made more receptive to connecting with the divine. And at the end of Luke 5, Jesus gives the parable of the old wineskins. And you don't put new wine into old dirty, like you wouldn't pour like a delicious drink into a dirty cup, like,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
it would like pollute it. You need something new.
You need to be born again.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting.
And they couldn't be before, you know, before he makes the ultimate sacrifice, they couldn't be, you know, the process wasn't there. So there was no need for them to fast.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've heard people who fast say, and I'm sure this is biblical because they always say it the same way, that you fast in order to come closer to God, to bring yourself closer to God. And you know what strikes me as interesting with that is that starvation is one avenue towards altered states of consciousness. You could have a psychedelic experience through fasting. It's possible. Lots of monks did it for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And to the idea that you could say, I'm not going to eat in order to bring myself close to God, and that might actually lead to a mystical experience, I think that's pretty interesting, man.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too. I also think it's interesting, and I think there's like some kind of connection to psychedelics with this as well. A lot of times, I've heard quite a few Orthodox people say, if you're new in the faith, don't bother fasting. Like you don't need to be doing that yet. You're probably not ready to be doing that yet. And the idea, again, to the best of my understanding, is that putting yourself in that state where you're open to God makes you open to other things too. And, you know, you have to have the discernment that maybe you don't have in the beginning of your faith. And I think that, like I said, the connection with psychedelics too, I think that we've talked about a lot of people are just of the opinion that any kind of epiphany you have on psychedelics is going to be good or, you know, true. I don't think that's true. I think that you can get bad shit from that too. And you might get bad shit that seems like good shit. You know, you might get an idea that like you just, with all of your rationality, is like, I think that this is all good, but maybe it's not, you know?
Yeah, maybe it's not. I had something there, man. I lost it again.
Don't fast if you're not ready.
Don't fast if you're not ready.
Don't take psychedelics if you're not ready.
Yeah. So the idea of being not ready is interesting. Oh, that's right. You said open yourself up to other things. That's what it was. So there's this implication in what you're saying that other things means that there are spiritual influences that aren't just good. That you're not just opening yourself up to God, but maybe something bad.
Powers and principalities.
Yeah, and some of them maybe are bad. So something about that I was gonna latch on to.
I know that's a hard one for you still. I think, you know, the idea that there's like negative forces.
Yeah.
In some way, you know, I think that in some way, in other ways, you do kind of are on that page.
I just don't think that the forces are external. That's the difference. You know, I believe they exist. I just don't think they're external. You brought up the idea of the soul. It's interesting to consider the soul being made of pieces, but it's also interesting to think of your psychology, your self, to be made of different pieces. And we talk about that, you know, in psychology all the time, where we say that you know, you've got different drives, different archetypes, different instincts, and sometimes they compete with one another. Jeez, my daughter's coming down the steps and I can hear her talking. Shit, man, that ruined my flow there. Shit. Powers and principalities, opening yourself up to dark forces. Oh, I know that's what it was. It was David Patrick Harry. He said something about along these lines, and I did a little Petersonian like sleight of hand so that I could accept it. So David Patrick Harry was talking about psychedelics, you know, having their cons, and he said that it opens you up to spiritual possession. That's what he said. Oh, God, it opens you up to spiritual possession, and that's one of those ideas, spiritual possession, that I would normally like just kind of scoff at. Spiritual possession. But there's a way that I think that the idea of spiritual possession, it makes sense. Oh God.
We might have to wrap this one up.
Yeah,
man.
we might have to. Spiritual possession. So, Jesus. Oh, David Patrick Henry. So he said, like this in the same way you did, that you open yourself up to like demonic forces and they're external, and that's dangerous. And when you do psychedelics, you have to be careful with what you're asking for, something like that. And then I thought about that for a while, and I thought about that. Like, this is the Petersonian bait and switch. I thought, well, there are things like addiction that come along with psychedelics. I'm not saying that psychedelics are particularly addictive, but you do find yourself chasing a certain dragon. You want to have a certain experience, and oh, this is killing me. And it also is a distraction, and it can be an obsession. I mean, I think it's fair to say, for me, for a while, it was an obsession. I think that's fair. And that keeps you from doing other things. It keeps you from maybe being productive, maybe making progress somehow, psychologically, spiritually. And those, you could say, those forces are destructive. They're like demons, addiction, obsession, they are, I just can't really imagine those forces external to myself. I think they're endogenous,
Yeah.
part of being a human, one of those pieces of our soul or pieces of our psyche that is the adversary. It's contrary to you.
I think that there is an aspect of it that is inherent to being human. I think that the external forces that I do believe in play on your inherent, the things that are inherent to you. They try to like push you towards those things.
Sorry, man. She's playing with toys out there, for Christ's sake. If you hear the Grinch song, golly.
It's an invasion.
Yeah. Kids, children. Oh, fuck. What do you want to do here, Kyle?
It's up to you,
man. Shit. All right. Well, we'll just try. Let's send my wife a text message. Just carry this on.
Carry on, my wayward son. I'm curious to see how much we can pick up of this Grinch music. Yeah.
Jesus. This is like that. Did you see that? It's not an old video now, but I think it was during COVID, when the businessman is like doing a news interview and he's in a suit and tie, and his kid opens the door
and comes in and like crawls and pulls the kid out.
Yeah, she does. There was two kids. There was one that walks in and one in a walker, and like the wife comes in and on her hands and knees and grabs the kid.
So did you see? Just to change the subject here, did you see that Iran and Saudi Arabia have reached some kind of agreement where they're going to start being cooperative with one another again?
I think I saw a headline like that. Was China involved in that?
I don't know.
So that's interesting.
I didn't see anything about China, but
you say Iran and Saudi?
Arabia.
Okay, so that's like the heart of Sunni Islam and the heart of Shia Islam. That's kind of interesting.
Yep.
What do you make of it?
I don't know what to make of it. I'm going to have to look into it more. I didn't really, I just kind of saw it this morning, so I didn't really have time to look into it. I was just kind of scanning headlines, but it's definitely interesting. I know that the conflict between Sunni and Shia and Iran and Saudi Arabia has something to do with the war in Yemen, why we're in Yemen. So that's good. Hopefully we can stop doing that. It's not like my strongest priority like it used to be a few years ago. I mean, I still think it's terrible.
Yeah.
But if we can if that puts an end to that, that's great.
Yeah. I know woefully little about geopolitics and history in the Middle East.
Yeah.
I know woefully little about it in Southeast Asia in particular, but Asia in general. I'm an ignorant bastard, Kyle.
I'm less ignorant than I used to be.
Yeah.
Pretty much every day.
Yeah.
So that's good.
That's true. Yeah.
But there's still a lot that I don't know. I mean,
So what's next on the exploration list then for you? Just continuing with the orthodoxy.
Yep. So I mean, I want to understand it better. I was kind of saying that one of the things that I like about orthodoxy is it's like complete, and I just, I want to, and it's complete. There's like different elements of it and they all like feed into each other. That it's like makes this one cohesive like unit of belief and action. And so, just like increasing my understanding so that I can act better, and then that acting better will increase my like the mystic element of it. Just continuing
that thing you said about your church experience missing something. I hadn't really thought about it that way. I hadn't put it that way to myself, but when you said that resonated with me. I'm like, that's exactly right. That's exactly what I felt. So if anybody listening out there grew up, like we did, grew up in the United States in a Christian, situation, whether you were particularly religious or not, maybe you went to church every Sunday, maybe you went to church just on the holidays, doesn't really matter. You had that sort of upbringing and you sat through your sermons and you did your, whatever, Bible study or Sunday school or whatever. And you came back from that as an adult thinking it was of very little value. And, it wasn't, like it seemed to be missing something that would make it sacred or holy, or something that would make it special. It's missing something. Maybe it's missing whatever it is that lights a fire under you that makes you want to,
it's missing that for sure.
It's missing something, right?
I think that, you remember the church that I went to with you and your ex-wife?
Yes.
A few times. That church is, I would say, a pretty good comparison to a lot of the churches that I went to. And that kind of a church is, people go beautifully. And to some level, even with going to an Orthodox church, you're going to have those days where it's like, man, I don't really want to go. I'd much rather just stay home, stay in bed, sleep in.
Yep.
But so I think that element's still going to be there. But with Orthodoxy, once you get in there, going to the types of churches that I went to, like if you have one of those mornings and you go, you're going to be like cranky and not really probably open to the message. And
right. Yeah.
But with the Orthodox, it's like so much more engaging, and like the experience is it's just engaging. Like whereas with the old type of church that I went to, you go there, you sit on the wooden pew, you stand up, you sit down to say, you stand up to sing, you sit down.
Yep.
The preacher gives like an hour-long sermon, may or may not be good.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it doesn't do anything for me.
Yep.
And even though I've only been to one Orthodox liturgy, so it's not like I have tons of experience, but the one that I went to, I couldn't even understand what they were saying. I didn't even speak the language, but it's just so obvious that there's something happening, that it's the people there are participating in something.
Yeah.
They're not going there to sit on a pew and, do their duty.
Yeah.
They're, we're talking about the acting. They're going, that's a big part of it.
How like one of the tactics teachers will do in school, if you're not paying attention, or if it's getting too noisy in the classroom, teachers will ask a question of somebody who's not paying attention, because they want to bring to your attention that you're not paying attention. They also want to make an example out of you. So it's like, you don't know the answer. You don't even know the question. Ha 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 ha. Yeah. I think that's something that I see I don't know if it's in Orthodoxy. I imagine it is, but I see it in Catholicism, where you brought up participation. So you're in church, and in Catholicism, at some point when the priest says a certain thing, it's a cue for the congregation to say their part.
Yeah.
They have to actually listen. They have to participate.
Yeah.
And it's like I said, like when the teacher asks the fucking troublemaker a question, it's like, are you paying attention?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do they do that in Orthodoxy?
Oh, there are definitely times where again, I have no idea what they're saying, but they say something and the people say something, or they,
Yeah.
cross themselves
Yeah,
and do
exactly.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, just the whole, I would say that going to an Orthodox liturgy is an experience. Whereas going to a Protestant church, it's like something to do, it's, yeah. And maybe it's maybe going to a Protestant church is better than going to a bar, but I don't think that you're getting the fullness of what is available to you.
Yeah.
Because what's available to you is like some mind-blowing stuff. Yeah.
Listen, I think that you're really onto something there in this, with the sense that church, at least in this country that I've been exposed to, is missing something, and what it's missing might be available in Orthodoxy, at least more so than anything else I've seen so far. So there's something that interests me about it, and I think what my next area is going to be reading some of those Christian mystics that fall under this tradition, just because I want to hear what they said. And I told you yesterday I bought a book and I couldn't remember the name of it. It's called Finite and Eternal Being. It's a paperback book that's up there, and it was expensive. And you don't expect to spend that kind of money on a paperback book, but it's because it wasn't reprinted and it's rare. And I heard about the lady. Her name is Stein. She was obviously a Jew, and became a Catholic nun.
One of the good ones.
and she's very mystical, this lady. So I'm very curious about it. That's going to be maybe the first one that I dig into, and then after that, like Meister Eckhart, John of the Cross. There's a whole bunch of them in the Christian mystic tradition. There's a bunch of them that aren't Christian, like Jacob Boehme.
Heretics.
And there's.
Oh no, they're not. I thought maybe you meant that like they were Christian and they got like discommunicated.
Oh, no.
They started getting a little too crazy.
No. These were like mystics that weren't explicitly religious, like Christian.
Gotcha.
But there's a whole bunch of them. And I'm very curious to see how this mystical experience that I had in psychedelic circumstances, how it happens in non-psychedelic circumstances, and also how they interpret it from a Christian framework. How do they interpret this experience that I like to talk about? But from my perspective, it's not explicitly Christian, although it has made me reconsider it has made me reconsider the person of Jesus. Like I don't know, like how much I'm looking at the clock, how much we want to get into this. I never had any trouble believing in God, and I never had any period of time where I was an atheist. But if you asked me, do I believe Jesus is the Son of God? I've never been anywhere close to as certain about that as that God exists. Never been an atheist. You couldn't budge me on it if you tried. I think it's logically impossible that there's no such thing as God. And I define God in a very unique way, and I've had trouble with that. But I've never been tempted to think there is no God. Never, not once, man. Not once. But if you ask me, do I believe Jesus is the Son of God? I'm like,
what does that even mean?
I mean, I feel blasphemous to say no. So that's why I just don't want to say no to that. But I've had periods in my life where I've been very skeptical about that and been challenged by that.
Why do you feel bad about it?
Because I was raised in a household where all of the people that I love and respect believe it, and to say that I don't believe it seems disrespectful, and it seems ungrateful, and it seems like all kinds of bad things.
So it's like some Nietzschean shit where you got all these things hanging on you, and
or some Freudian shit, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. You don't feel like that, like some kind of guilt burning in your soul. It's like in the background. You don't really notice it too much, but when you say something blasphemous, there's just some little thing.
No, we're very different people.
Really?
Yeah. When I was an atheist, materialist, nihilist, I would say shit like that all the time. Like I had no problem with it at all. Now I have a problem with it because I believe,
Yeah.
So
the thing that got me able to reconsider Jesus as a spiritually significant idea is partly becoming God experience, because that's what Jesus is supposed to represent. And also Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson telling the biblical stories and the Christian story in a way that meant more than just this person represents your path to heaven. You know, it's like, this is your ticket.
Yeah.
You know, that's how
which is the truth. But it's more complicated than that, you know?
Yeah. It needs to be more complicated.
It has to be.
It's like people say, Christians say, that the sacrifice of Jesus is your free ticket to eternity. All you have to do is accept it. It comes easy, you know? And I feel like it shouldn't come easy, you know? It needs to be earned.
Yeah.
You know?
There's one thing I hear a lot of Orthodox people talk about, and it's a word that I'm familiar with from libertarian shit, praxis.
Yeah.
And it's just the same thing. It's the action. It's the doing. It's not, you don't like change your mind and then don't change anything else about your life and you're good. You know, like, you have to do it. You have to.
Do you think this emphasis on doing, because I think both you and I are having a little bit of that, like, coming into focus. When I told you that the mystical experience that I had most last told me I have to try to see the world as I see the psychedelic, you know, magic. I have to see that in the world.
Yep.
And it's like, it seems to be pulling me into action.
Yep.
And that's what you see. And I wonder, do you think that has to do with, like, our age? Do you think this is the era of we've developed certain skills and maturities, and now we have to act?
I don't think, I mean, what am I trying to say? I don't think that is the reason why it's important. It's not like it's switched on and it's important now because we're getting older. I think it's always a key to the experience,
Yep.
Whether you're a child or whether you're an old man. The acting out of the faith, that is always important. But I think maybe it's more noticeable to us because we're at a certain time period.
Yeah, like I was just thinking about, like, that messianic people say that, like, when kids are, like, let's say early in college years, they're in this messianic phase where they want to change the world, you know? And it's like a natural psychological stage to be in, where you think you want to, you know,
clean your room, bucko.
Yeah, clean your room, bucko. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, what does that even mean? You know, it's like you've got these conflicting ideas, and it's just like, it's a simple thing. It's like, no, the hell it's not. It's my Jordan Peterson.
No, it's bloody not.
No, it's bloody not.
And you have to move your fingers more. He doesn't move his fingers too. Oh boy.
You got a serpent on the hill. No, he's like kind of going Irish a little bit.
Yeah. So I think it's fair to say that I was obsessed with Jordan Peterson for a while. I'm happy that I don't feel quite the same way.
Oh yeah. So let's talk about Jordan Peterson.
All right.
That fucking video, dude. Jordan Peterson is losing it. He's like having a moment. Chris sent me this video. It was like a shocking video. It was a funny thing to open my phone and see. And it's this video that Jordan Peterson quote tweeted, and he said that, like, crazy stuff's going on in China, man. And it's this video of a bunch of fat dudes laying in, like, a bed in a hospital looking setting, getting whacked off by some kind of dystopian Brave New World machine. And Jordan Peterson retweets this like it's something that's really going on in China. It's clearly porn. It's clearly like some kind of fetish porn. And it says that it's in China. All of the dudes in the video are fat and they've got like decent sized penises. So it's not fucking China. Like, Jordan's losing it, man. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Maybe it was like he just didn't get a lot of sleep that night. Like, we're having an issue today, being retarded.
Yeah. Listen, I don't know, but if I came across that video without context, I don't know how you make heads or tails of it, man. I don't think I would have thought that was porn.
Yeah.
I mean, it clearly could be, but I don't have any fucking idea what that is.
You're not that much of an internet dude, you know? So that's the difference. It's like, I internet a lot and I'm like, that's not fucking real. That's not a, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, you bringing up Jordan Peterson just I cannot believe you shared that. I'm almost like, is he joking?
I have no idea, man. But I still love Jordan Peterson.
I still love Jordan Peterson too.
I don't like his new stuff as much as his old stuff. But I don't know if that's fair either. I think that I had like a spark when I was introduced to Jordan Peterson that took me on this like journey of knowledge. And I'm really grateful for it, because if it wasn't for him, I never would have got into Jung. I never would have read Neumann. And that stuff has been, or any of the Jungian stuff that I like, the von Franz and the Ettinger and all that. I wouldn't have read any of that if it wasn't for Jordan. And that stuff has been super, super important for me. Like, I've learned so much about myself and about like my own philosophy. I've developed it so much more because I had that experience. And Jordan is the one that made that, attractive to me.
Yeah.
I will be forever grateful for Jordan, but if he goes off the rocker one day, so be it.
Happens.
I still think
it happens.
I still defend him too. I especially because so many people that criticize Jordan Peterson are libs that don't have any fucking idea what he says or means.
I like hearing criticisms of anyone from the right, especially people who are, ostensibly right wing, to hear them criticized from the right.
Yeah.
I'm always a big fan of that kind of stuff.
Criticized from the right.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be more of that. It just seems like it's been so one-sided, for so long, the political conversation.
A lot of criticism of Jordan Peterson from the right has a lot to do with what I was talking about earlier, the like strictly pragmatic interpretation of Christianity.
But you can't argue with the fact that it made an impression on both of us.
Yeah, I don't think it's about arguing that it doesn't make an impression, or it's like the end. If you follow that to its logical conclusion, you're not getting. It's like we're talking about with faith and works, and you're missing something. There's a critical element of the belief system that you are like following that you're not getting. And that was like where I talked about this in that podcast I did with Jason from the 2-Bit podcast, that was for years. Morality, the society, to and I can like go about behaving in that way to the best of my ability. But if I'm missing the keystone of the whole thing, doesn't matter.
Yeah. So I would love to explore that. I don't think we don't have time to explore that, because I would like to know what you would point to say is missing from, let's say, a strictly like psychological interpretation of Christian morality and the Christian stories. What do you think's really missing there if you're only considering it to be like an analogy or a it has a psychological meaning but only a story? Like what are you really missing? Especially because Jordan, you can't get around God in Jordan's philosophy. You can't. You can get around Jesus, but
go ahead.
But you can't get around God, I don't think.
You're missing, and the first thing that I think that you're missing is you're missing faith. You're still trying to reason everything, and I have to be able to understand it. I have to be able to make sense of it. You don't. There's some stuff that you're never going to be able to.
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff that like you would be debating in this theoretical debate with Jim Bob, or that Ryan was with, a lot of that stuff, you have to take it on faith. I just don't think that you're going to be able to weigh and measure and even reason it out, like use logic and reason. You're not capable.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say that at the heart of Jordan's philosophy is two things: chaos and order. The unknowable is chaos, and that's really the most important part. That's where order comes from. So in Jordan's system, in his model, you do have the unknowable. The unknowable becomes the unknown becomes the known. You have this transformation happening in reality. But you do have this unknowable part that is like what we talk about when we talk about deep religious ideas, when we talk about God, for instance, the unknowable, the unexperienceable, that which is at the top of the hierarchy. I think that's a religious idea, and Jordan will say it's a religious idea. You can't get around it. That's not a practical idea necessarily, that you have to contend with chaos, and that's a real thing. It's a real thing psychologically, and it's a real thing in the world.
I guess, yeah.
You can call that pragmatic or practical, but it's not. It's religious. It's a religious thing. And so much of that is, so much of this talk about the unconscious, there's no explanation for that doesn't border on the religious, that there's a source of knowledge and a source of being that is invisible and you carry it with you, the unconscious that you carry with you. It's a part of you, but you don't have access to it, and it has knowledge that you don't have, and it knows what you need, and it to progress psychologically. It's like you got God built in this scenario. We call it the unconscious. It's like a different word.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's not spirit. Doesn't mean it's not religion.
I don't know. I definitely see what you're saying, but I do think that there is just a way of conceptualizing when you're thinking through that kind of, I don't know, Jordan Petersonian interpretation, that it's like, this is all an aspect, a creation of my mind, and I don't believe that that's the truth. And I think that there has to be the belief of that, and the faith in that is, I think, one of the big differences.
Yeah, that's an interesting framing. I would say that, I don't know that Jordan would say this, but I would say that what you mean by mind, Jordan might be comfortable calling God. So
yeah,
if everything is, I don't think Jordan is an idealist or anything. So
but that's the thing that gets down to the heart of that debate with Ryan and Jim Bob, and the separation that you and I have is that I don't believe that everything is God in the complete way that you and Ryan do. I do think that there's an element of God to all of creation. I don't really know how to explain that. That's one of those things that I'm happy to think about, but I don't think I'll ever really understand.
Yeah, no, and that's one of those paradoxes that come about when you have these sorts of conversations. I don't know how well you could talk about them in a debate form, but you can't avoid them.
I forget where I heard this. I think it was probably David Patrick Harry. I listened to a lot of that guy, but he was talking about Jordan Peterson, and he was saying that I think he was talking to Jonathan Pageau, and Jordan Peterson was saying, I want to believe, what I was just saying, that it's not all just in your mind or God, however he wants to define that. But so he clearly doesn't believe, I don't know, the externality, the externality of God or something like that. I don't think he believes that Christ literally was made flesh. It was the Logos made flesh. And he's saying to Jonathan Pageau, I want to be able to believe that, but I can't, but I want to. And he's kind of emotional about it. I want to be able to believe it. And it's yeah, you want to be able to believe it because it has to on some level, you know, for all of the things that you value to really matter, you have to actually believe it.
And that's the faith component.
That's the faith aspect of it.
So I agree with you there. I follow you. I think that somebody who gets emotional and says what Jordan said in that example, that they want to believe it, that's somebody that's on the precipice of faith, that hasn't taken the leap, maybe, but knows that that's all that's left to do. So if Jordan's ideas and whatever brought him to that point, I think they're good. I think they're good. Anybody who gets to the point that Jordan's at, where he says, I want to believe, and I don't know what's stopping me. You're at that decision point. It's not easy to get to that point, So if Jordan's ideas got him to that point and help others to get to that point, I think that's good. It's just a matter of taking the leap. Some people will, some people won't. I think the reason Jordan won't, or maybe won't admit to it, is because he's been an academic for so long, he needs to be taken seriously. And in his world, the only way to be taken seriously is to not
atheist, bro.
Basically.
Yeah.
You can't talk a certain way about, spirituality. You can't. You have to talk about it like psychology. You have to talk about it like narrative, and that's what he does. That's exactly what he does.
Yeah. I'd like to have a private conversation with Jordan, be like, what's really going on?
I would love to.
Yeah.
I'll have a beer with you, Jordan.
He doesn't drink beer, but
I'll have a keto beer with you. I'll have a carnivore beer with you.
Steak with you, bro.
I'll drink deer blood with you, Jordan.
Blind up a steak.
All right, you wrapping it up?
I guess so, yeah.
All right.
Hey, we got to start.
Damn, like and subscribe, you guys.
Subscribe, comment, follow us on Twitter, all of that good shit.
Tell all your friends.
Yeah, man.
Love you.
Bye.
Well, there you have it.